was talking to people, and they're not all Polish students in my class. As a sheer fluke, I had a very senior Eurocrat, European public servant, who was on the task force dealing with the whole migrant crisis. And he told me, and I already had heard this before, and I came independently to the same conclusion, this is the biggest crisis facing Europe since the Second World War. We're not talking 2,000 or 5,000 people. We're talking in the magnitude of millions of people. People here in Canada and the United States do not understand the magnitude of the crisis. There are some 4 million Syrians in refugee camps outside of Syria as we speak. The largest single group are in Turkey. On top of that, there's 7 million Syrians in Syria who have been displaced from their homes to other parts of Syria who want to get out of Syria. And that's just Syria. We haven't talked about Afghanistan. We haven't talked about these other countries. The UN states that there are 60 million refugees in the world. So when I hear politicians saying, I don't care which one, whether it's Mulcair or Trudeau or Harper saying, well, we'll take 10,000 or 2,000 or 20,000. This is 1/100th or 1/1,000,000th 1% of the problem. And they are being overwhelmed in Europe, just completely overwhelmed. In fact, I was predicting, as others were too, when I was there just last week, I said sooner or later, somebody's going to break the Schengen Accord. The Schengen Accord is the European agreement that allows for the mobility of people across borders. I know you know this, but some Canadians may not realize that in Europe, inside the European Union, you drive from Poland to Germany, there's no border anymore. It's like driving from Ontario to Manitoba or Ontario to Quebec. There's a sign saying you've left this place to go to that place. There's no border controls. Well, I was suggesting, and others were too, that it was only a question of time before they re-implement border controls. And this week, that's exactly what we saw. And I think that this is going to transform the European project because the whole European project was built on open borders, open flow of goods, services, people, and capital. And now they've seen they just cannot cope. And we can, people can accuse them of being racist or xenophobic. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But the sheer magnitudes of the number of refugees is just astonishing. I mean, it is just really astonishing. And I saw it. I saw refugees walking down the street in parts of where I was. I was down in eastern Germany. I was in Dresden and then down in Regensburg. And I was in Poland and in the Czech Republic. And they're just overwhelmed. And so I don't see the solution. I'm not saying there shouldn't be people taking refugees, but I don't believe if we look up the total numbers and say 60 million refugees, 30 OECD countries, including Canada and the United States, if you just did simple basic arithmetic and said, okay, let's arbitrarily assume every OECD country is going to contribute 1/30th, that means each country is going to take 2 million refugees. That's just not going to happen. So what that means is the solution, and I saw last night the president of the European Union was saying the very same thing. The solution has to be found back in the Middle East. And I'm not getting into a debate on whether there should be a war and bombing or not, but we have to go back to the origins and deal with the problems in Afghanistan, in Syria, and elsewhere that admittedly some Western countries and the United States contributed to by going in there 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago. Be that as it may, that's past history. They've got to address the problem inside the Middle East because I don't believe that the West, the OECD, not Canada, not the States, not the European countries, are willing to take in 5 or 10 million or 30 million refugees. It's just not going to happen.